Now that I've had a chance to battle with BQ in the open field, it's time to update one of my most popular video series on the channel, where I review the very best hero pairings for each troop type. And today, we're going to be laser focused on infantry. What are the best infantry pairs if you run 1, 2, or 3, maybe even 2 with a leadership configuration, infantry combinations in the open field? So let's jump into Tier Maker and start to build these out. And if you're new to my channel, consider subscribing, because I make this guide every time that new commanders land in game, and people find it incredibly helpful. Use the timestamps to jump to whichever part you'd like, whether it's the combinations or even the talent checkup, which will come at the end. The thing that's so crazy about BQ, now that he's in the game, is that he is obviously incredibly powerful. He's a little bit of a glass cannon, reminds me a lot of XY when he first landed in game, but he seems like as a smite commander he's going to do huge damage, and you pair with Liu Che, and like this is very obviously your best infantry march in the game. I think you should be using Pincer on this configuration. Feels pretty uncontroversial to me that you'll get a ton of AoE smite damage using this pairing. If you run one infantry march in the game, this is your one and only march. Now, if you run a second infantry march, and there's a lot to enjoy with infantry, let me tell you, there's honestly like more viability for infantry than any other troop type at almost any other point in the game, with the exception of archers. Long ago, you could honestly make like 5 very good archer marches. Okay, so if you're running infantry, I really like using Ragnar and then Skippy Prime as your second infantry march. Extremely powerful. So if you run one infantry march, it is the BQ Liu Che Pincer, and if you run 2, you simply add in Ragnar Skippy Wedge. Now, the weirdness of this is specifically Wedge. Are we going to continue to get skill damage commanders or not? And I don't know the answer. I'm not convinced that we necessarily will. Maybe we will, but I like absolutely cannot predict with any level of confidence that we will get skill damage in the next cycle. I've genuinely no clue. So under the assumption that we probably don't get skill damage infantry, then we get into kind of a weirder world where if you were just starting out, you could go in the direction of saying, well, maybe I don't do Ragnar Skippy. Maybe I do 2 solid smite damage armies. Now, if you wanted to do that, what you could do, you could say, okay, I'm going to bring in either Alexander the Great or Wallace to pair with Liu Che, and you'd run it kind of like this. It's either Wallace with Liu Che or Liu Che with Alex. Both of those are great. And BQ you could pair with CJ. Okay, now that is also a really solid configuration. Now, in addition, we've also seen that Philip is incredibly powerful. We'll talk more about how you could use Philip, but infantry are so strong right now in Rise of Kingdoms that I would generally say that if you could put Philip in either a leadership or some other troop type, that's probably the way to go. So for 2 infantry, you've got the skill damage, smite damage setup that I showed you before, or you've got the double smite damage. This is a double, well, maybe not double Pincer. If you did BQ CJ, you are going to use Pincer. If you did William Wallace with Liu Che, you'd use Pincer, but you'd prefer Arch if you did Liu Che and paired with Alexander the Great. I think Arch would be a very good pick and gives you the diversity of formations, which if you rally Garrison, it's handy to have both Arch and Pincer, at least at this moment in time. We'll see how I feel about that after I use Tokugawa more. So that's where I'm at for multiple 2-army configurations for infantry, depending on what formation you think the future of the game will feature. And I could not tell you what that's going to be. Now, once we go to 3 infantry pairs, things get very interesting. Obviously, if you're running pure infantry, you just add back in the Ragnar Skippy and like, boom, you're cooking. With a straight face, like this is extremely viable. All of this is good. In fact, one other thing you could do, okay, that is worth mentioning is if you didn't have CJ, You could do BQ with Wallace and Liu Che with Alex. Also a powerful way to run it. You could even take CJ and make him the primary with Liu Che. That also would be pretty reasonable. There are so many ways to slice this up. I don't know which exactly of those pairings is the very best way to run it, especially because CJ is very new. And so we need to sort of use him more in the field. But I generally get the impression that CJ is a little bit of a glass cannon. So I might honestly kind of prefer this configuration of pairing him with Liu Che. Anyways, 3 infantry marches, extremely solid. No one would look at you funny for doing this. Now, normally when I start to talk about leadership alternatives, people do start to look at you funny. So now is the part where we get the funny looks, but both in testing and in gameplay, in KVK gameplay, I've been extremely impressed with BQ paired with Philip. All right, well, geez, Chisgule, like if we're going to do that, and we're using 3 infantry armies, then assuredly Ragnar and Skippy still stay together. BQ and Philip can go together. In fact, Philip should be the primary. That's where it really kind of pops off. That's because on the active skill, Philip is giving himself 40% more all damage, and then you hit with a fat AoE from BQ. Like, it does make sense why that would just hit so hard. And the crazy part about that is that I'm using Echelon. So I'm buffing the ever-living heck out of my team while cranking damage. Okay. Yeah, no, it's a combo. It is a combo. Ragnar Skippy, obviously a combo, has been incredible. And then up top, you just have so many options. Like, all of these are great options. Do you want to do like Chisgule and use, William Wallace with Liu Che? I find it to be outstanding. A bunch of people would say they prefer Liu Che with Alex. Forget the Wallace. Hey, it's very good. And now we have CJ as like yet another option. He hasn't even gotten a museum buff. So you could do CJ with Liu Che. Now CJ has the Smite talent tree. That's why I think he should be the primary. That's why Wallace is the primary as well in this Liu Che configuration. The only thing not optional in lineup 1 is the Liu Che. That is not optional. That is a big part of what makes any of those other 3 commanders super strong, with the exception of CJ, who actually, put him with any of the Smite commanders, he's going to do well. All right. So when we look at this, I would rate this as also extremely viable. Now, there's a bunch of commanders we didn't really talk about here. Guan is, yes, now benched for me personally, with the exception of Canyon, where I still have managed to find uses for him. I've never tested with Pyrrhus, but I think in the early game, Pyrrhus could be pretty legit. Late game, I don't think he can deliver. You've got Tariq ibn Ziyad, more of a rally commander, truly. You've got Sargon, who fell off. Like, you would never know that Sargon came to the game after Skippy Prime. Yep. Skippy Prime is just a different level of power, man. Nevsky, Skippy Prime. What a time to be alive when those commanders came into the game. Constantine is just for Canyon. Martel, I feel like, is not... That's not where you want to be, with the exception of garrisoning. I mean, you could do stuff with them in the open field. I mention it because, like, they were considerations. There are other commanders that you could put up there, and, if you're in the early game, making it just to the late game, you don't have a lot of options. There's a bunch of stuff you could do, right? But I think this is where we land, along with the other 3 infantry config that I was showing earlier, as a really great spot for infantry. They are an incredible level of strength, where we now genuinely are sort of picking at, I don't know what to call this, like the sort of micro optimizations of like, hey, like, do you have this formation or that formation? What a luxury champagne problem to have, to be like, can't figure out which formation to use. There's so many that are just so good with infantry. Yeah, no, infantry are kind of busted now. So, let's get a look at talents, okay? If you're on board for some of these commander pairings that I've showed you, what talents should you be using? Well, let's jump in game. Let's start with BQ talents. My assumption is that if you're using BQ as the primary, you are pairing him with a commander that also does smite damage, and so you go all in on the smite tree. We swing up to hold the line because it's totally busted, Getting health from strong a body is amazing. Get a little bit of extra rage, really strong generally, and then march speed along with the damage to calves along the way. There's your BQ talent build. If you're using Ragnar as the primary, you're going big skill damage, maxing out this talent over here, Feral Nature. I also get latent power. Very important. This affects damage over time abilities. Ragnar Prime does damage over time. I think this is worth taking. You are foregoing a little bit of march speed, okay? But I did take Hold the Line maxed, Strong a Body. I put only 2 points in the Iron Spear. Kind of debatable on how popular I think Cav are going to be. I think that the Iron Spear take could be better than Undying Fury, although Rage is always very powerful. But I don't know if it's powerful enough to justify the loss of damage to cavalry, which are, hey, look, they're very powerful after Arthur came into the game especially. There is your build for Ragnar Prime. From there, I do want to talk about Liu Che. Because Liu Che, obviously goated. In the open field, this is the build that I found is most performant. And there's a couple things here that are critical. I think that it is critical to have fight to the death. I found this to be incredibly powerful. It's a lot of damage. This talent over here, Martial Mastery, represents a lot of damage. We go and we get Hold the Line, Strong of Body, and a bunch of stats and march speed off to the side here. We also have Effortless in the build, in part because you're getting march speed along the way. That's very valuable. Once you're there, you may as well get Effortless, even though you may not stay in combat for that long. Still worth picking up, okay? And this is the infantry build for Liu Che. Now that we've covered those, however, we do need to talk about William Wallace, who I have been using for open field. Now, the funny thing is that this is still a rally build. Pack-a-Punch I use for rallies. So I will hilariously change my talents in real time to the builds that I prefer. It's this one over here. I do think that for fielding, Wallace has done well with this. This commander's troop deals 6% more smite damage, but also takes 6% more normal damage. So you're getting kind of wrecked when you're getting targeted. You're getting wrecked by both smite and combo. Yikes. I think we make this swap and see how I like it. It's a funny thing to do because I'm already doing very, very, very well with this combination, but let's make the swap. We'll do it now, confirm it, and we'll call this open field, right? This talent build over here, more of a rally build before SA came into the game, Scipio Aemilianus. All right, now that we've covered the Wallace, the BQ, Liu Che, Ragnar Prime, we need to talk very briefly about leadership. So if you are going to use the Philip primary, all right, and that is very powerful. In fact, I think I have that geared up. There it is. Here is the build that I would recommend. It's a little weird, so bear with me, but I've moved in on Cage of Thorns. I actually want to try to slow people. 25% slow is pretty decent. It only lasts for 3 seconds, but I'll take it. AoE slow, okay? In addition, I've taken Strategic Prowess. When I use an active skill, I gain 20% defense. Obviously, Philip giving extra activations of active skills is going to benefit from that a lot. And then the remainder of the tree here is just giving me a bunch of stats on the left side. So a very powerful build here, and I've found that this works incredibly well. I use only one troop type in this configuration. It's just infantry, all right? So we move all in on that plan. Now, I am using, on the topic of formations, and maybe we switched gears just a little bit here, but if you go leadership, Echelon with influential and civilized is really the key. Civilized makes it so that when you buff, you're giving rage, which is kind of gross. Influential makes it so that you buff more, and it gives attack, which in the new view of the world with crystal technology is going to be better than ever. So yeah, that is a incredibly powerful set. And both of those legendary inscriptions are obtainable with enough luck and or commitment. One, it comes from KVK, that's civilized. Oh no, it's influential, rather. And civilized comes from the exchange shop, all right? When it comes to pincer formation, I mean, I think generally for open field, it will just be more damage. All depends on how much you get focused. Arch, unfortunately, comes with a major downside. I'm actually garrisoning with it right now, which is that destructive is a, as I understand it, very suboptimal armament. You'd much rather have something else, which is definitely a bummer. But long story short, the arch stuff is solid. I have enjoyed it. I get great results. I have not switched to pincer yet, although I do intend to do some swap to pincer. But I garrison, which I'm literally doing right now as I record this video, and being able to do all this damage is really great. Now, the thing that is a little weird is the equipment. We're in a weird spot for equipment. And the reason we're in a weird spot for equipment is twofold. The first reason is that we just got a brand new piece of equipment to the game as of the time of this recording. And it's specifically for Smite, okay? And it is this accessory over here. The Wearer's Troop deals 3% more Smite damage. 3% more Smite damage ain't much, but you have a 50% chance to heal 5% of slightly wounded units inflicted by that Smite damage. Now, things get interesting. Because the Smite damage you deal translates to healing. Healing means you have more troops. More troops means you deal more damage. So this could be a very powerful accessory to use. I think generally speaking, Horn is just really, really, really strong. Ring has historically been really, 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 really strong. The only downside with Ring is that, yeah, if your opponent's doing a lot of back and forth, and most do these days, well, kind of a bummer that you could have this trigger, but then not actually be connected with the enemy for the time in which your damage is sort of buffed. Instead, a lot of people look to the Greatest Glory. So what I think for open field meta, you're probably going to want to have Horn plus Saddle of 1,000 Blessings or a Greatest Glory. It kind of depends on your philosophy on how valuable you think the healing is going to be from the Saddle of 1,000 Blessings, all right? Now, I did cover equipment way more in depth in a prior video, but there is one thing that I want to talk about in this video, which is that I have often touted this set as sort of a meta set. I suppose money where my mouth is, right, on using Greatest Glory here and Ring. When I'm garrisoning, I don't have to worry about a player moving away from me, per se. Like, if you want to attack me, then attack me. I'm out in the open, right, in that garrison. But I generally stay away from a Horn in a garrison situation, because if you get swarmed, that extra rage doesn't actually do anything for you. Okay, I'm kind of going off a deep end here, but that's why I'm not wearing the Horn. Horn is extremely powerful if you were like rallying with infantry, or fielding with infantry. Okay, fielding with infantry, I would say Horn plus Greatest Glory would be the way to go. But what I have been hearing, and what others have sort of figured out in their analysis, is that you might actually be better off with the leadership health gear for the legs and the boots, and that might give you a slight edge in combat effectiveness over what I've got here. You're basically replacing Eternal Knight and these boots, the Eternal Empire boots, with health stuff. You could also replace the gloves, and you're taking a slight defense loss, but switching to the leadership stuff. But the leadership stuff could be a pretty cool pathway. It kind of depends on how much health the army has. But this is a topic I covered in a separate video, the balance of stats and which ones are the most important. I'll have a card in the end screen for that one. I'll also have a card in the end screen for a detailed breakdown of infantry equipment. You can go check out that video. It's the last time I went in and shared what I thought the best open field pairs were, but you could just use the timestamps to jump ahead the part about equipment and the best choices, all right? Because the early game balance is pretty much the same, although we could talk about some stuff for that too, all right? You enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, subscribe. Until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.